My name is Alvarez. I'm 42 years old. I'm a senior sergeant in the 82nd Airborne Division. I've seen a lot in my life. Exploding mines, mutilated bodies, people staring death in the face. But the real explosion was in a PDF file. No one ever told me that the word war could start with an email. It was my 4th month in Kandahar. The Afghan sun seemed sworn to melt the earth. Sand poured into my boots and sweat poured down my body. I opened my laptop to rest in the tent for a few minutes. Among a few unimportant messages, an email from Alexis caught my attention. The subject line read simply, "Let's be adults about this." An alarm went off in my mind. As soon as I read that line, a strange uneasiness gripped me. I clicked and opened the message. There were only 3 sentences. "I've sent in the divorce papers. I've emptied the joint account. Jeremy now lives in our house in Spokane." My heart stopped for a few seconds. At that moment, the sounds around me went silent. Radio voices, engine roar, commander announcements, they all went away. I could only hear my heartbeat. I read the email twice, then turned off the screen, bowed my head, took a deep breath, went under the cold water in the communal shower, put on my uniform and went on duty as if nothing had happened. When I went back to bed at night, part of me was torn to pieces, but I couldn't show it. There's no room for tears in war. I switched the laptop back on. I answered the email. I typed one word, understood. No argument, no reproach, no explanation, just surrender. Wilson, my bedmate, was reading a book as usual. "Are you all right?" he asked without looking up. "Just some things at home," I said. He nodded. The subject was closed. Soldiers know when a man needs to be alone. When I met Alexis, I was in the most exciting period of my life. I was only 22, and she was a gorgeous psychology student. The first time we met in the cafeteria of the university campus, she was holding Freud's book. He was the only one sitting at my table. I sat in his empty chair and said, "Freud? Dangerous choice." And he smiled. And our story, which started with that smile, lasted 13 years. When we got married, we had many dreams. Alexis wanted to open a counseling center. I wanted to further my military career and become an officer. But wars don't wait for plans. As my duties increased, my time at home decreased. Every time I left, there was worry in her eyes, but she always saw me off. "I'll hold on, as long as you're fine," he would say. This sentence cheered me up many times. We bought our first house on the edge of Spokane. It was old, but it was ours. We had boxes in the attic. We hung frames on the walls together. Alexis loved breakfast, so on the weekends I would surprise her with pancakes, strawberry jam, Turkish coffee. It was small things, but I believed I was building a home. Over the years, things changed. Alexis' glances were shorter. Her phone was always on silent. Once she got a text at 3 a.m., but she didn't read it. "Yoga teacher," she said. I smiled. I wanted reassurance because disbelief was the beginning of a battle that would tear me apart inside. When we were together, I always looked into his eyes, but lately he wasn't looking at me. He was looking away. I noticed it, but I ignored it. To see is to be torn apart. And I've already been shattered too many times in the wars. I'd never heard of Jeremy before the email. He's the new man in Alexis's life, not her new boyfriend. The one who lives in the house, spends the money in my account, sleeps in my bed. His name was mentioned so casually in the email, as if he had been in my life for years. When I was fighting in Kandahar, someone broke into my house, replaced me, took my wife, reset me, and I learned about it in an email attachment. We had $48,000 in our joint account. The furniture in our house belonged to me. Even our cat Max was registered in my name. But then I realized that nothing really belonged to me. I only owned it as long as Alexis let me. On the battlefield, death comes suddenly. But Alexis's betrayal was a silent poison that slowly consumed me. A bullet pierces suddenly, but it coursed through my veins. As the days passed, I became more and more absorbed in my duties in Kandahar. I volunteered for night shifts because the more sleep-deprived I became, the less I remembered. One day, Wilson put his hand on my shoulder. "Man," he said, "sometimes wars start at home, but nobody wins." That night, for the first time, I wanted to forget Alexis, but I could still hear her laugh. Most of all, the note she wrote to me. On a piece of paper I carried on my chest, it said, "I will always wait for you. Giving up is not in our vocabulary." Now those words had also turned into a PDF file. This story doesn't start here, but this is where it falls apart. The betrayal may have come in an email, but the answer, I will write it. When I return from the battlefield, I will have only one suitcase, but the account inside me will be thousands of pages long. My return from Kandahar was quiet. No greeters, no send-offs. I landed at the military base and packed my bag. I took the bus back to Spokane, but I didn't go home. It didn't even cross my mind to go back to Alexis's house. Let's call it Jeremy's house. I rented a room in a damp-walled, yellow-lit motel on the edge of town, the door creaking, the bathroom barely running hot water. But at least it drowned out the noise inside me. It was like the silence after a battle, a muffled, dense, musty-smelling silence. For the first 3 days, I just slept, without getting out of bed, without moving. I wanted to disconnect from the outside world. On the fourth day, I opened Alexis's social media accounts. She was laughing. Brunches with Jeremy, wine tastings, poses with the dog in the park. Each one was like a dagger. I used to live in that kitchen with her smile while I made pancakes. Now she was sharing that kitchen with someone else, on my sheets with my coffee mug. One night I woke up in a cold sweat. I dreamt I was on duty, but I had no body armor. Bullets were dancing in the air. In one corner, Alexis was waving, and behind her was Jeremy. Alexis was holding his hand, and then they both turned their backs and walked away. And there I was, waiting for the bullets to come at me. When I woke up, I realized the war was no longer outside. It was inside me. I texted Wilson. How did you deal with the betrayal? His reply was one sentence. Observe, understand, then quietly destroy it. That sentence put me at the hotel table. I'd planned countless operations in the past, but this was different. This was personal. I opened my notebook. At the top of the page, I put this heading, List of Things to Get Back. I put my name first, Alvarez. I looked into the company Alexis and Jeremy have set up. Interior design, investment consultancy, property consultancy, shiny website, lots of testimonials, carefully chosen words. But the past leaves a mark, and I'm a soldier on the trail. Some of the transactions with Alexis's signature on the documents were based on properties still registered to me. That meant Alexis still made transactions through me. It was a big break. One evening, I found Jeremy's old accounting office on a back street in Spokane, a building with a faded sign. Inside, I met a man in his 60s. I'd like to talk to you about Jeremy Ross, I said politely. The man took a deep breath and said, Jeremy. He talks sweet, but only until he gets the contract signed. His face contorted, his voice lowered. The damage he caused is still undone, but he was a good salesman. That sentence was enough. Alexis was not attracted to his charms, but to his cunning. For months I worked quietly, renting a small office in downtown Spokane, a single desk, a second-hand chair, and an old-fashioned printer. But it became my base of operations. I called an old mate of mine, Reggie. We'd worked together on data security in Afghanistan. I told him, I need to quietly unravel a company's digital history. At first, he was hesitant, but when I showed him the documents, he looked at the screen and said, these documents killed you, but they can resurrect you. We found some strange transfers in the company's tax records, large payments to bogus consulting firms. 2 of those firms belonged to Jeremy's cousin. One of them existed digitally, but not in reality. Plus, these transfers were made under Alexis's authorized signature. I archived every document, emails, bank statements, copies of deeds. I made file folders. This wasn't a classic revenge plot. This was a staged justice operation, Alvarez's last mission, but I wanted to see them one last time before I applied. I sat in a little cafe in the center of town. I knew it was a place they frequented, and a few days later they came, Alexis and Jeremy. When coffee came to their table, Alexis laughed, the same laugh, but her eyes no longer sparkled. Jeremy was talking on the phone without looking up, and something inside me snapped. It wasn't jealousy, it wasn't longing, it was pity, not for them, for myself. I had devoted everything to this woman. I had crossed borders and walked through mined lands for her, and in my absence, he offered a home to someone else. First, I sent documents to Jeremy's old contacts, copied email traffic, bank records, fake consulting contracts. Then I reached out to Alexis's investment firms. Just documents in an envelope. No names. But the message was clear. Within 3 weeks, their credit accounts were frozen. Banks demanded collateral. Jeremy's name started showing up on tax evasion lists. Alexis's company website crashed. One by one, her social media accounts were deleted. Then it hit the local news. Success story or fraud case? I looked in the mirror that morning. I smiled at myself. Good start, Alvarez, I said. But there was still something missing. Who wrote those sentences in the PDF? Alexis's old friend Lisa gave me that answer. I reached out to her. She didn't want to talk. But we met one night in a quiet pub outside Spokane. She was agitated. She was running her finger along the rim of the glass, averting her eyes. Then she looked up. Jeremy met Alexis before you did. He was innocent at first. Just coffee. But then it progressed. It continued while you were on duty. Jeremy was with her when she wrote that email. They formed the sentences together. Something cold went through me. So they didn't just take my life. They wrote my sentences. Lisa looked away. Alexis was emotional, but Jeremy is smart. He tells people what they want to hear. He wrote the story that made Alexis forget you. Everything was clear now. That PDF wasn't just an email. It was a document of a planned purge. And now I was going to write my reply to this document. I went out of Spokane that night. I had hunting plans with one of my old Army buddies. We sat around a campfire in the pine forest. The sky was silent. I was silent. My insides were screaming. But in that silence, I made a decision. This is not revenge. This was an operation to remind me who I was. I was no longer returning. I was being rewritten. And I wasn't going to be an extra in their story. I was the hero of my own story. The operation began quietly but continued in a shattering manner. One by one, the entire organization that Alexis and Jeremy had built secretly over the years began to unravel, leaving no stone unturned. In the first few weeks, they experienced only financial chaos. But then came the social collapse, and that was the worst of it. Jeremy's name now appeared in internet searches with the words fraud, tax evasion, forgery. Alexis's business contacts stopped seeing him. Newspapers that had once headlined her as a strong female figure were now writing innuendo between the lines, with headlines like, "Did the female entrepreneur named in the signature scandal speak?" Zrenya, they were both accusing and ignoring her. I was watching from the sidelines. Sometimes my coffee was getting cold. Sometimes my eyes froze in the corner of the screen. But something was growing inside me, a silent justice. This justice was not shouting. It wasn't slashing around with a sword in its hand. Quietly, patiently, delicately. Jeremy took his first big hit when the company's main account was shut down. The bank froze the accounts for breaching security protocols. Credit cards were canceled. His account balance was zeroed out. He couldn't get a loan from any bank. His name was blacklisted. The financial industry decided not to work with him anymore. He moved to Seattle. He didn't last long there either. He was asked about the gaps in his CV. If he was honest, he wasn't hired. When he lied, his past was soon exposed. His past followed him everywhere. At last, he returned to his family. His mom set him up with a bed and a desk in the garage. Alexis tried to reach him during this time, but Jeremy wouldn't even answer. "I burned everything for you. You only used me for your own salvation," he said on the phone. I heard this sentence through a mutual acquaintance of ours, and that's when I realized Jeremy was no more. It was only a shadow. Alexis's decline was slower, but more painful. Every day she melted a little more. Her parents invited her to their home, but her father would not speak to her. His mother prepared a room with only an old bed, faded curtains, and a cupboard with a door that didn't close properly. This room was more like a room of exile than a refuge. Alexis had become a burden. Once the pride of her family, she was now the subject of gossip. Old friends stopped seeing her. Uninvited weddings, unanswered messages, conversations that were treated as if they didn't exist. All this was her new life. One Sunday morning, I saw him in the park behind the church. He was wearing his old coat, sitting on a bench. She had nothing with her. No books, no bag. Only his eyes, silently asking for forgiveness. But no one came. I went home that day. I lived in a little cabin outside of Spokane. I fed the chickens in the morning and tilled the soil in my garden. When I was a kid, my grandfather used to say, "Revenge does not grow in the soil, but in patience." Now, as I picked the tomatoes I had patiently grown with my hands, I understood his words better. But there was still something missing. Closure. The day of the trial arrived. We gathered in a small courtroom in the city courthouse. Alexis was there. Her eyes were puffy. Her hair was in a messy bun. She used to have Jeremy with her. Now she was alone. Not even her lawyer stood behind her as she spoke. The judge read the judgment. The defendant has engaged in unauthorized real and personal property transactions. Compensation for the damages of the plaintiff Alvarez, aiding and abetting Jeremy Ross in acts of forgery, is established by documents. Amount of damages, $74,000. I've also been reinstated in possession of the house, and Alexis's counseling license was revoked. Jeremy was listed as a high-risk business partner in the state system. That's when Alexis's eyes turned to me. We locked eyes. We didn't speak, but I knew she was waiting for a word from me, and I just bowed my head to her. It was the kind of farewell he would understand. A week later, I got a letter. It was handwritten. It was Alexis's. "Alvarez, Jeremy was with me when I wrote that email. He chose the words, but I signed it because I wanted to believe that you weren't coming back, and I was tired of waiting for you. Now I realize, and all I was waiting for was destruction. I don't expect your forgiveness, but know that I will never find someone like you again." I read the letter. Did I tear it up? No, I didn't. Did I reply? No, I didn't. I just folded it up and put it in my old trunk. The past doesn't go in the bin. It's kept, but it's not reread. It's left to gather dust. I closed my eyes for a moment while folding that letter. I remembered a night I spent in Kandahar. Silence reigned inside the tent. As I lay in bed, I looked at an old message from him on my mobile phone. "We will grow old together. Promise me." I looked at that promise and closed my eyes. At that moment, time seemed to stop. No sound of war, no order, was heavier than the burden that message carried. Maybe that was the first time I realized it. Some battles are fought in the heart, not in the desert. Years passed. Jeremy's name was erased. Alexis never started a business again. I started my life over. I met new people, but I never told anyone about my past, because sometimes living heals, not telling. One day in an old bookstore in downtown Spokane, I wandered among the dusty shelves, the smell of old books drifting like a quiet melody across the shelves. My fingers skimmed the edges of a novel with worn bindings. Time seemed to have stopped. Everything was ordinary until I saw her. Alexis was at the other end of the shelf. She was carrying a thick notebook. The cover was frayed, the edges curled. Maybe she had been carrying it for years. There were unforgiven sentences, unfinished lines. At that moment, she looked as if she had stepped out of the pages of a novel. A pale face, tired shoulders, but still that familiar stance, like a memory seeping from the past. Our eyes met. What words fell from our lips? Nor did a smile appear on our faces. We just stood like two strangers in a moment when time slowed down. I, with thousands of words running through me, couldn't say any of them. He kept his head down and continued to examine the bookcase. I noticed that his hands were shaking, or maybe that's how I wanted to see it. I stayed there for a few more seconds. Maybe it wasn't seconds. It was the weight of the past. Then I slowly turned around. This time I didn't look back, because some stories end in silence, and some goodbyes are never said. That night I returned to my cabin. In the dim light of the room with a stove, I opened the page of my notebook. With my tired hands, I began to write heavy sentences. And the words came as if they had been accumulating inside me for years, silent but certain. Revenge is not taken with a voice, but with silence. Justice is done not in the courtroom, but in the mirror. You destroyed me, but I rewrote myself word by word, and this time I decide the end of the story. My name is Alvarez, and you, if one day you get a PDF, and if there are only 3 sentences in it, what do you do?